For the past 8 or 9 months now, I've been shooting on the Zcam E2S6 cinema camera. It was a pretty nifty little camera when I first bought it, but the crazy thing about it is that it actually keeps getting better and better. Hi, I'm John from Wiley Visuals, and today we're talking about the version 0.98 firmware update for the Zcam E2 series cameras. Now, Zcam have been really proactive about responding to user concerns, and previously they've had firmware updates for bug fixes or to add additional features such as ProRes RAW output, more frame rates, or file recovery. But the most recent update has been a big step up in terms of codec options and workflow. With this latest update, they've now added ProRes support to all frame rates and resolutions, which is hugely beneficial when it comes to easy workflows. Previously, higher frame rates would usually require you to swap to shooting in H.265, which is still a bit of a nightmare when it comes to editing. I'd always end up transcoding all my H.265 footage to ProRes to get it to edit smoothly, and this extra step in the workflow always caused me to second guess myself when I was shooting. I'd actually find myself having to choose to shoot at a lower frame rate than I really wanted in order to preserve an easy editing workflow. Now with the new firmware update, there's no restrictions on that, and I can shoot 6K at up to 48 frames a second, which I think is actually more than the new Red Komodo can do at the same resolution. I can also shoot 4K 2.4:1 aspect ratio ProRes at up to 100 frames a second. And on the E2 M4 camera, you can actually shoot DCI 4K at up to 120 frames per second in ProRes 422. I think it's so cool, not only that this unlocks modes that I previously wouldn't have considered using, but also that it essentially makes the camera even better than when I purchased it in the first place. And of course, the proof is in the pudding. So here's some examples of 6K ProRes at 48 frames per second, slowed down to a project timeline of 25 frames per second.
Tried to write you a song that no one's ever heard before. Wrote lines and words of our love, but somehow it needed more. Oh, maybe the way that our hearts became true is the same way they all do.
Now, obviously you're not going to see the full 6K resolution on YouTube, but this footage is insanely good. And while 6K might be overkill for a lot of things, it does let me do some pretty cool stuff. For example, I can get a vertical crop from this footage that would work out to be 1822 by 3240 in vertical 9:16 format. So that is almost equivalent to a 4K vertical crop that I can get from this footage, which pretty much prevents me from ever having to rotate the camera when a client requests some vertical video. It's also plenty of resolution for pulling frame grabs as well. In fact, at roughly 18 megapixels, some of the frame grabs I've pulled out are better than photos I was shooting on my Canon 7D a few years ago, which had roughly the same resolution. Not only that, but it's all been captured at 48 frames a second in a codec that I can pull straight into Adobe Premiere and start editing seamlessly. It's so great to see a company that actually responds to not only fix user complaints via firmware, but also to actively improve the cameras that they've already sold. I'm super happy with this camera at the moment. I've been loving the images I'm getting from it, and also constantly evolving my rig from the original setup I had. In a couple of months, I'll be putting together my 1-year review of the E2S6, where I'll share a few more of my thoughts about it. But to sum it up right now, I'd say that if you're looking for an entry-level cinema camera that packs a real punch, then it's really hard to go past the Zcam E2 flagship models. Also, just quickly, before I finish up, I'd like to point out that this video is 100% unsponsored, just like all my others. I feel like having sponsors who pay for me to talk about their product would just dilute my content, and I'd much prefer for my content to remain undiluted, full-bodied and full-flavoured. just like this refreshing pale ale. That way I can really quench your thirst for information. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.